everyone, it's Andrea and welcome to this edition of Talks in the Car. Often we hear that God speaks in a still, small voice. And for me, what that means is that sometimes the way God speaks, the way God gets our attention, the way God relays information is not always in, thunderstorms and that deep voice that we hear from God on TV. Sometimes he does things in a little less subtle ways, but in the ways that he conveys information, it is ways that we A, can relate to, but B, it also will leave an impact in our lives that will keep us remembering, that will keep us thinking about what it is that God has said. For those of you who have had my book, Flowers from the Master's Garden, I tell a story in there about how God relayed some information for me through the Charlie Brown, It's the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown cartoon. And God gave me a whole revelation about that particular cartoon and gave me a whole story that to this day still impacts my life. But it was something that I can relate to. It's something, Charlie Brown is something that I grew up with. So for God to use that particular story in order to share information with me is something that I definitely remember. God also tends to speak to me when I'm having some in-depth conversations with my son. He's a man of little words, but when he speaks and when he decides that he really wants to talk, most of the time there's some information and there's some nuggets that I can glean from there and be like, okay, God, I see where you're talking about. I see where you're coming from. So I want to encourage you on today, if you are looking to hear from God, and doesn't even have to be anything particular that you're looking to hear about, but if you're looking to hear from God, perhaps there is something special that you've been praying about, you're trying to get clarity on, that you're trying to unravel, you're trying to figure out some certain situations or details. I encourage you to tune up your ears, tune up that fine-tuning skills, and really look around you and see how God wants to convey information to you. It could be through a song. It could be through something that you're reading. It could be through something that you look at on TV. It could be through a memory. It could be through something that somebody says, whether or not it's in church or a co-worker or a friend. It could be any situation, because God is able to use any situation in order to get his word across, to get his message across, in order to share with you what he wants you to know. Probably about a month ago, I was speaking with a co-worker of mine, and there was something that I was sharing with her. Someone had said something to me, and I couldn't understand what that person was really trying to say. And I didn't really want to go back and ask the person what the meaning of what they said, and how what they said related to me. And so and it had been bothering me for a couple of weeks, and they didn't say anything bad, but what they did say just kind of had me thinking. It's like, what does that mean? So finally I had a conversation, and I was sharing the situation with my coworker, and just like that, she said, this is what that person is trying to say. And I was like, I had like a whole, oh wow moment, because then I began to understand what they were saying. So then when I went back to that person later on, I said, I wanted to ask you this question, but I was a little bit hesitant to ask you what you meant by this, but did you mean, A, B, C, and D? And they were like, Andrea, you got it. And it was so profound for me, because in the big picture, it was relatively simple. But at that time, I wasn't in a place in order to really hear and digest what they were saying. And again, it wasn't anything bad. It was actually rather good. But I just could not grasp what they were saying. But having that conversation with my coworker, and her being in a place where she could kind of look past the things that were a part of that conversation in order to say, Andrea, this is what they meant. It was like, Oh, wow. And I was so grateful, and it was such a blessing to me. So in saying that, again, if you're looking to hear from God, if you're looking to get some clarity, if you're looking to get some understanding, if you've been praying about something, if you've been seeking God on some things, if you're wanting to get some questions answered, I encourage you to look at those small, still voice. Listen for that small, still voice of God to see how he wants to speak to you. So be in tune. Have your spiritual senses tuned up so that you can hear and listen for those things, because God sometimes, again, is not always straightforward, but there are lessons that he can teach us just through our daily walk. So listen to your children, listen to your co-workers, listen to the things that they're talking about on the radio or on TV. Think back to some of your childhood experiences. Of course, listen to the people who are speaking in church. Just be in tune and be expecting. And that's important too. When we are wanting to hear from God, we have to expect that he's going to answer. We are going to expect that he's going to speak. And so be in a place of expectation, looking for God to speak, looking for God to convey information to you, so that those things that you need to hear from God, the things that you want to hear from God, the things that God wants you to hear from him, you'll be able to pick those up, and you'll be able to take those nuggets and to walk through your journey and do it in a way that will best lead you to a closer walk with Christ. Have a wonderful, wonderful day, and we will see you next time on Talks in the Car.